I'm Paul Edwards. I'm an independently published horror author, and first and foremost, a monster kid. Welcome to my 100th anniversary video. That didn't sound quite right, did it? But see, today I'm reading Famous Monsters of Filmland, issue number 100. And on the back, this is billed in typical Famous Monsters format as the 100th anniversary issue. Well, it's issue number 100, and it was an anniversary issue. It was their 15th anniversary. But the way they word it, 100th anniversary issue, makes it seem that the magazine was 100 years old, and it wasn't quite there yet. And I'm not quite there yet either. But I thought some of you might like to look through this great vintage monster magazine with me, just in case you don't own your own copy of Famous Monsters' 100th anniversary issue. And together we can see what kind of monster goodness is in here. All right, let's get right into it. Famous Monsters of Filmland, 100th issue. And of course, Boris Karloff's Frankenstein monster gets to grace the cover of this issue. It's billed as the world's first monster fan magazine. Here we go. Oh, we're starting right out with the very first issue of Famous Monsters cover. Back in 1958, this was the first issue of Famous Monsters of Filmland's cover. And here's a little history of the magazine, which Forrest J. Ackerman tells us was called Forey's Folly when it first came out, like Seward's Folly. And of course, it turned out to be very successful. As always, we have the Fang Mail section. Kids could write in and talk about their favorite monsters or their favorite movies, and they would send pictures of themselves in monster makeup that they made at home. Whoa. Nice. This looks like that guy in the, you know that Outer Limits episode where the guy had huge eyes, where he was a mutant and he could make things happen with his mind? That's what that reminds me of. We laughed all the way to the morgue. Murdraculous Discovery. Here it is. We got all kinds of, oh my gosh, the Island of Lost Stills. We got all kinds of Forrest J. Ackerman puns in here. All right, let's get cracking. Alice in Monsterland. This picture is from the very end of Abbott and Costello Meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, where the Mr. Hyde formula gets circulated to a whole bunch of Bobbies, and they all turn into Mr. Hydes. Lon Chaney, the Man of a Thousand Faces. Lon Chaney here playing Mr. Wu, and of course here playing the Phantom of the Opera. This really was his signature role, the role for which he's best remembered a century later. He did his own makeup effects, and he was called the Man of a Thousand Faces for very good reason. In fact, if you've never seen the Lon Chaney silent version of Phantom of the Opera, then you definitely can check it out on my Silent Horror Films podcast. It's there for you to see, along with some other great silent horrors. And then, after Lon Chaney Sr. died, his son Creighton went into acting, and the studio insisted that he call himself Lon Chaney Jr. So here is Lon Chaney Jr. as Kharis the Mummy in The Mummy's Curse. Boris Karloff retrospective. But these are not pictures of Karloff, though. This is from the film Tarantula. Karloff wasn't in that. This is Anthony Quinn as the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And this is from the Portrait of Dorian Gray. None of these are Karloff or Lon Chaney. But the article continues to tell us about Boris Karloff taking over Lon Chaney's spot as the king of horror. Oh, this is from The Monster Maker. This film is on another podcast of mine, the All Night Spook Show podcast. If you've never seen The Monster Maker from the 1940s, you can check that out. This is from Abbott and Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Nice. This is from Blood of the Vampire, which was a Hammer-like vampire film, although it wasn't actually a Hammer film. Here's a Mexican vampire. There were a whole series of Mexican vampire movies that were dubbed into English. Now we're talking about Bela Lugosi, but none of these are Bela Lugosi. So there's a mismatch between the pictures and the text. The article just goes on talking about the kings of horror. The pictures are just, they seem to be almost random. This is Michael Landon from I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Nice. Peter Lorre in one of his greatest horror film roles from Mad Love. Okay, I was stumped for a long time by what this picture was. I had seen this picture circulated and couldn't identify what movie it was from, and was mystified as to what I had been missing. Finally, I did learn the answer. It's sometimes mistakenly referred to as Dwight Frye playing Renfield, but it's not. It's a different actor who played Renfield in the stage production of Dracula, the one that led to the 1931 movie. So the answer is this is Renfield from the stage play Dracula. And in fact, this picture was on an early issue of Famous Monsters of Filmland. Nice. Farewell to Edward G. Robinson. Sometimes when you see old movies and you stop and think for a minute and you realize everybody that I'm watching on the screen here has died. And just for a moment, it might make you sad. But then when you think about it, nothing would have made these entertainers happier than to know that future generations were looking back and enjoying their work. So it's really not sad at all. It's actually happy in its own weird way. These people would have loved the fact that a generation that wasn't even born yet when they died was watching their movies and enjoying them. Vampire Circus, a film that's better than it sounds. It's also a song by Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats. Vampire Circus. Okay, we couldn't get too far without Peter Cushing. Yep. So a lot of times they would list up-and-coming horror movies, and with the benefit of hindsight, we can see that in some of them they were correct, and in some of them they were incorrect. For example, Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell was a Hammer film that came out not long after this issue. But The Bride of Phibes, that never happened. That was Dr. Phibes Rises Again, they wound up calling that film. Blackula 2 or Blackula Lives Again was not called either of those. It was called Scream, Blackula, Scream. And so forth. A lot of times we get a different title than what they wound up going with. And sometimes they'll list a film that it turns out was completely canceled and never did materialize. I'll tell you right now, there's no Journey of the Oceanauts. I wonder what that wound up being. There was a sequel to Rosemary's Baby, tragically. Great film, terrible sequel. Like The Exorcist. Ooh, The Creeping Flesh. we laughed all the way to the morgue. The history of Famous Monsters' first 15 years. There's Forrest J. Ackerman looming over Christopher Lee. He got to meet all the big horror stars, the ones that were old and the ones that were current at the time. Everybody loved Forrest J. Ackerman. The Murdraculous discovery is really an interview with the guy who played Dr. Garth in Dracula's Daughter 40 years before this article was written. He was in his 80s and still up and kicking, and gave them an earful. King Kong is awesome. Awesome. But these extreme close-ups of King Kong sometimes make me laugh. These are reader requests, kids that wrote in and asked for things. For instance, here's Glenn Strange in The Mad Monster playing Pedro the Werewolf. That's also on my All Night Spook Show podcast. You can see that film if you've never seen it. You got Boris Karloff, Herbert Lom. Oh. Yep, William Marshall as Blackula. There's a Morlock from The Time Machine. I went to school with a kid whose last name was Morlock, and every time I heard it, that was all I could think of, the Morlock monsters. Okay. Oh. This is from the Outer Limits TV series, and there's Dr. Cyclops. I was just watching Dr. Cyclops the other day. That's good timing. Gypsy woman from the Wolfman and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. And of course, the Man Who Laughs. This villain's image was the inspiration for the character of the Joker. Tor Johnson. That's sort of the same expression that King Kong image had a little earlier. There's Michael Rennie from when he was on Lost in Space. Oh, Ray Harryhausen. Nice. Ingrid Pitt. Dwight Fry. So in the 1970s, up until Star Wars came out, Planet of the Apes was the big science fiction franchise. So it's no surprise at all they would have a Planet of the Apes picture in here. Nice. The winner of FM's 1973 Monster Makeup Contest. These are kids, readers that would submit pictures of their monster makeup. That is pretty good. You gotta admit, that's pretty good. The truth about Dracula. Tarzan of the movies. Okay. The return of Lugosi. Bela comes back. So Bela Lugosi, of course, played Dracula. He played Dracula on stage in many productions, many performances. but he only played Count Dracula in 2 movies. 1931, Dracula, and 1948, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. But Bela Lugosi did play other vampires, and here he is in Return of the Vampire, playing Count Armand Tesla. But of course, his most famous role was the 1931 film version of Dracula, which this is from. Here he is as Murder LaGrange in White Zombie. That's actually probably my favorite performance of his. The Invisible Ray, one of many times he co-starred with Boris Karloff. Of course, another great shot from the 1931 Dracula. Mae Clarke, the actress who played Dr. Frankenstein's fiance in the 1931 Frankenstein. Would you take an IOU from this man? Oh boy. Island of Lost Souls. That was the 1930s version of Island of Dr. Moreau with Charles Laughton as Dr. Moreau. And another great overlooked performance by Bela Lugosi as one of the Beast Men. Of course, you can get movie masks. At least in this ad, they show you a photograph of the mask you're getting, not just a drawing. I've always thought, even though this just says The Mad Doctor, I've always thought it's clearly Dr. Neiman from House of Frankenstein. Even when I was a little kid, I would look at this picture and I'd be like, it's awesome, but King Kong is nowhere near that big. Okay, we're at issue 100. So, of course, the back issues pages now have little bitty thumbnail size pictures of the covers because there's so many of them. Movie monster kits, nice. I have this Godzilla one. I still have it, although it's in terrible condition, but I do have it. Paperbacks. If only I had my books out back in the 70s, I could have sold them in the back pages of Famous Monsters of Filmland. That would have been the perfect targeting of an audience. Monster World was the sister publication to Famous Monsters of Filmland. You could send away and get a reel of film that had highlights of one of your favorite monster movies. It wasn't the whole movie. It was maybe 10 minutes of footage from the movie. They had a lot of good ones, though. More of these homemade monster makeup designs by the kids reading the magazines. Some of these are pretty good, really. And other kids got their pictures in the magazine for writing in. You get your vinyl albums. A lot of times these were old radio broadcasts. I had most of these, but I didn't have the crown jewel of the collection, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Of course, got some Planet of the Apes goodies in there. Wanted more readers like, and there's a ton of them. It must have been a huge deal to a kid to have their picture printed in a magazine like this. A letter from the publisher thanking the fans for the first 100 issues. And listen, I want to thank you guys for my 100th anniversary video. In other words, for viewing my channel for 100 videos worth of productions. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much to everyone who watched any of my videos, who subscribed or liked any of my videos. And thank you so much for supporting my book series on Amazon, the Mourner's Woods books. They're 6 monster-related books that are available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook at Amazon.com. My name again is Paul Edwards. I look forward to seeing you in the next 100 videos. And until then, I'll see you in Mourner's Woods.